Hey, what is up, guys? It is Ben 10,000 of yugioh, your friendly neighborhood Yu-Gi-Oh superhero. So today's video is going to be something a little different than I normally do. I don't really do discussions that often, but I don't know. I've had this line of discussion videos talking about different aspects of the game in my head. So I've decided I'm going to take a swing at it, especially since we're kind of in ban list season, and I don't really feel comfortable working on decks all that much because they could kind of change at the drop of a hat. But before we get into that, I want to let you guys know we have merch if you want to support the channel. We've got t-shirts, we've got masks, we've got cell phone cases, things like that, and we've also got stickers. Those are the cheap item. So if you're just looking for something you can stick on a deck box or, you know, on a binder, you know, that kind of thing, just that'd be a really cheap and easy item for you guys to get that would support the channel, and I'd be greatly appreciative. Now, let's get on to the topic at hand, which is we're talking about cards that are extenders. I know this isn't a very popular monster, but this monster is an example of a extender. So, but before we get into that, let's talk about what extenders are. Extenders are cards in the game that extend your play. They're the after play or the pre-setup play to your starter. The reason why I say your pre-setup play is because sometimes, like for example, a card like Zephyros the Elite could be used as a extender, but you have to set up for it. That's kind of the example I'm going with here. Or Photon Thrasher. It's not your starter, it's your extender that's gonna, help your starter, if that makes any sense. That being said, we're gonna be talking about all the different kinds of extenders. So I'm going to flip the camera around, and I'm going to show you my desk where I have all the different extenders laid out. Alright, guys. So the way that I view extenders are in three separate kind of categories. We have low-cost extenders, costly extenders, and high-risk, high-reward extenders. And I'll get to this category alone here in a minute, but before we get into that, let's go ahead and start about low-cost extenders, right? So low-cost extenders are cards like, for example, like your Link Slayer here. You can also consider things like Photon Thrasher as a more popular example of that. We also have your Ascended Thunder, which costs you life points, or you have the ones that are kind of situational, like Chronomaly Tula Guardian here, who requires a field spell. You also have Instant Fusion, which is kind of in the same vein as Ascendant. You also have Scapegoat, which is a low cost, but is going to cost you something in time. And then you have, like I said, you have the more situational ones, like these. These are kind of the categories that I'm going with here, and Scapegoat's kind of in its own little separate category. And I'm showing you the different kinds here because an extender isn't always necessarily inherently a monster card. It can also be a spell or a trap that gets you to or becomes a monster. Other examples of this could be, like, more accurately, even like cards like Fiend Sanctuary can be an extender, depending on the deck that you are playing. That being stated, guys, so these are examples of low-cost extenders. So basically, what I'm getting at is these kinds of extenders don't usually cost you anything in card advantage. All of them have their own kind of costs. This is true. Like, for example, with Link Slayer, you can't control a monster to get him out. With Shade Brigadine, you have to not have any trap cards to activate it immediately. Scapegoat's going to cost you some time to get out its maximum value. Instant Fusion and Ascendant of Thunder are going to cost you life points. And then, of course, Ties of the Brethren and the Chronomaly Tula Guardian are situational based. So basically, they need another card to get their maximum value. But these are low-cost extenders, and that's the point of this segment of the video. Is these don't really cost you anything in card advantage. Now, they might take some setup, but they won't cost you anything, and most of the time you can immediately use them. Now you have high cost, as I view them as high cost extenders. And the reason I call this in the high cost is because they can cost you card advantage in order to use them. These are cards like 1-for-1, Dark Refer, and White Stingray. These two cards all of these cards basically require you to ditch cards from your hands. These guys all require monsters in this case, but it may not necessarily be limited to monsters. It may just depend on the card, but these are examples of what I'm talking about for high-cost extenders. Then you have what I call the high-risk, high-rewards extenders. You can almost put them in the same category as the high-cost extenders, but I kind of consider them a separate entity because usually what they are monsters that typically summon other monsters from the hand or from the deck, and they're very, like, you know, most of the time they're very specific. So these are the examples that I have right here, because each one of these cards will summon you a monster from your hand. The Summoner Monk is the one that will summon you one from the deck, but it's also exceptionally high risk, high reward, because these cards on their own are not very powerful. So basically, if your opponent was to Imperm, Effect Veiler, Ghost Ogre, etc., you could potentially be, you know, in a very compromised position. So that's just something you want to think about when you're picking the extenders. This video is very much inspired by the video where I was talking about creating or deck building creatively, and this is something that you want to think. This is another video that's in that same line of thought. Is you basically want to build this video. That's the kind of point of this video. This is to help you build decks with a creative mindset and how you can go about maximizing your output when you're doing so. So these are just examples of cards you want to think about. That, you know, these are just the examples of the different kinds of extenders, and these are exactly the kind of cards you're going to need. It's also a good thing to think about is if you're picking extenders that also serve other purposes. So for example, if we go into the high risk, high rewards one, like for example, if we use Summoner Monk, this guy can also get a spell card out of the hand, which can be useful depending on the spell. Dark Refer is another one, because in a pinch it can be a starter card depending on the deck that you're playing. Most people use it as an extender, but the idea here is if worst case scenario, if you had to, you could summon it, ditch a dark monster, and send a dark monster from the deck. And there are dark decks that benefit from that. So he could also be a starter in a pinch. And then of course, like we go over here with the freer ones, the ones that I like to use as examples of high powered extenders would be these guys, because if you have to, Scapegoat could defend your life points. Instant Fusion, depending on the fusion monster you get, could also be a disruption or make a card that your opponent would have to respond to. Or in the case of like Link Slayer, you could potentially take out back row. So that's just something else that you're going to want to think about when you are doing creative deck building, and you want to have extenders that boost your play even further than it could normally go. Anyway, guys, that's our video on extenders. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If there's anything you think I missed, or something that you want to hear me talk about that's in the same vein as creative deck building, put in the future, put that in the comments below. I've been on a bit of a brainstorming session for deck building creatively, because I think that that's a good way for us budget or casual players to keep up with the meta players, is figuring out ways how we can think outside the box and throw them off. Yeah. So if you guys want to throw your input in below and maybe help me come up with a name for this series, because I don't fucking know, I'd be greatly appreciative. Anyway, guys, I'm Untitled Chapter. I'm your friendly neighborhood Yu-Gi-Oh superhero, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.